I was asked this past Sunday, how do I get the most out of this series? It wasn't quite worded that way, but that was the idea behind the question that they asked. And I would say that to get the most out of this series is one, of course, you want to regularly listen, and to help you remember what you're hearing is take the time then to read the passage in the week that follows to cover what just read that passage that we covered, and the bigger chunks the better. I think last time, I probably read faster than some, but I think it only took me about 45 minutes to read all the chapters that we covered. And then if you could summarize it or talk to somebody about it and tell them what you've learned or what the material, that would really help with you're able to remember it. And then, of course, the important thing is to discover, what does this say to me about humans, and more particularly about myself? And then most importantly, what am I learning about God's character and about who God is and what my response should be? Now, one of the points that Canadians I guess we've heard in the news, we've heard the buzz, I guess you might say, is about Canada becoming America's 51st state. And I was just reflecting on, well, how much do we know as Canadians know about Canada? And for that matter, if you're an American, how much do you know about Canada? And particularly the area I want to focus on today is just geographical, where it is on the map, where it is on the globe, where it is particularly latitudinally. That do we have an appreciation for where southern Canada is? That we call it Southern Ontario. It's the very province that I live in. Do we have an appreciation for that, where that is in retrospect or in respect to other parts of the country and the United States? Like, for instance, Toronto, our provincial capital, is further south than 7 U.S. state capitals. And that if you're in Detroit and you want to get to, the quickest way to get to Canada is to drive south to Windsor, which lies there on the border. And if you want to go a little bit further south to a town, Kingsville, which is our most southern town in Canada, it shares the same latitude as California's northern border. And of course, there are some areas that are a little bit further south yet in Canada. That supposedly 70% of Canadians live south of the 49th parallel. In other words, most Canadians live south of Seattle, Washington. And that 50% of Canadians live south of states like Washington and North Dakota. Put another way, as one person had put it together, that 31% of the contingent USA, so that excludes Hawaii and Alaska, but the southernmost part of Canada lies south. Or put it another way, there are 27 states, 27 American states that are in whole or in part further north than the southernmost part of Canada. And why do I talk about that we can often think we know, but really don't know. And it takes sometimes looking at a map or a globe to actually help us visualize. And I would say it would help us a lot if we did have that picture and that appreciation, not only for Canada and the United States, but to help us understand the big picture as we read through the Bible, as we study through the Bible, as we look at the picture, right? To know where this took place, what it looks like in modern day, what it looked like then, where things were. And I hope that you took some time this past week to look it up on the internet, to look at some pictures, both of the modern and the days of the patriarch, or to look at maybe at the maps at the back of your Bible, so that you could visualize what was going on. And of course, to summarize just to quickly, so this gets cemented in your brain, right? We started in the beginning, that is, with the creation. And then, of course, came the fall of humankind. Then we talked about the flood, and then the division of the nations. And then we jump forward to this is about 4,000 years ago. We get to that point where the story picks up at a place called Ur the Chaldeans, right? Ur, which was near the Persian Gulf, at least traditionally, that's what's been understood. And we're introduced to, and I said salt, right, to help us remember, S-A-L-T, Sarah, Abraham, Lot, and Terah. And of course, we also then talked about how they were moving up to Canaan, but they started out from Ur, traditionally understood as they had to go up along the Euphrates, right? The Tigris, huge river too, like almost 1,200 miles long, 1,900 kilometers, like going from Winnipeg to Vancouver. That's how long it is. And then the Euphrates, even longer, about, 1,700 miles, maybe 2,800 kilometers long. That's further than Thunder Bay to Vancouver. And these are huge rivers, not quite as big as the Missouri or the Mississippi, but very big rivers that they travel along. And they go almost from one end to the other, almost, not quite, but they travel along a portion of it to get to the place where called Haran, where they settle until Terah dies. There's some that say, well, maybe Haran, that there was another Ur that was closer. Some of these things are really hard to prove or to know for sure. But we know that when Terah dies and God comes to Abraham and calls him to go to a place that I will show you, and then he makes this promise to him, right? And I sort of go over this because this is important, right? This blessing that he'll make him into a great nation, he'll make his name great, and all the world will be blessed through him. And then there's that promise, and there's blessings that go along with that. And so Abraham takes Sarah and Lot, and they travel, and they leave, and Canaan doesn't take them so long to get to, but that's where they're heading. But they travel down in through Canaan, and they encounter at some point in their travels, right, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, of course, the Mediterranean's over to the west, and the area that we call now, in that area we call Israel, that now present day Israel as well. And this is the land that God promises to Abraham. And of course, at some point, they have to go to Egypt because of the famine, and the distance from Haran in Turkey, modern day Turkey, down to Egypt is about 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers. Doing our best, the scholars' best, figuring out where they think they would have traveled. And of course, they're with their livestock. They're not driving a car. You can imagine the length of time. And of course, over all of this time, Abraham has become quite wealthy. But the one thing, of course, and then, of course, they do leave Egypt, and they come back. But the one thing that hasn't happened, he has become wealthy, and he's got a good name, and like people respect him. But the one thing he hasn't had that's concerning him, right, is that he doesn't have a son that, my goodness, he dies, one of his servants is going to get it all. And so Sarah and Abraham think they can help God. And Ishmael is born to Hagar. That wasn't God's plan. God didn't need their help that way. And when the time is right, God enables Sarah to become pregnant, and they have Isaac. Now, of course, there is some contention between these two boys and their mothers, which is often the way things go, right? When we don't do things God's way, there's fallout from that. And so we talked about how Abraham had to pass the test, you might say, of putting God first, and then he learns that when you put God first, God provides. Isaac grows up, and we start in chapter 23, sort of this new material, and Sarah dies at 127 years old. Abraham, he's 10 years older. He's anticipating his own death, and he's concerned. Isaac's got no family, no wife. There's no family, and he doesn't want him to choose from the Canaanites. He wants him connected with his own family, which is common in that day, right? And also the fact of the connection with his own family believed in the same God that he did. And so he sends his most trusted servant out to find a wife for Rebekah to find a wife for Isaac from where they'd come from. And so the servant has to travel all the way back to Haran. And then he does meet. You can imagine he's praying about this. This is important to him for sure. He's praying and asking God to provide, and he meets Rebekah. And he goes and he goes to the head of the household, and he's able to say, it's interesting, Rebekah is described as very good looking, and she's beautiful. And he also goes to the head of the household and say, yeah, my master is very rich. We would like to ask, for Rebekah to come to marry his son Isaac, who will stand to inherit it all. And the servant had been concerned maybe she won't say yes. But Rebekah does say yes, and they go back, and they're married, Isaac and Rebekah, and we're told that Isaac loves her dearly. And she's a comfort to him with his mother dying. And Abraham eventually does die and leave everything to Isaac. Isaac and Ishmael show up, and they bury him with Sarah. And we get a little bit of a sort of like a genealogy on Ishmael. But we know that the story flows with God's plan through Isaac, who he's 40 when he marries Rebekah, and he's in the same place as Abraham found himself. He's not having any children. And so he prays to God about this. And I was going to say I wanted to read a little bit before this, just a few verses where maybe I'll go back here just to say, so Rebekah does, so he prays to God, as I was saying, so he prays to God for Rebekah to get pregnant. She does, and she's pregnant with two twins, and these twins are born, Esau first, then Jacob are their names, and they look different, they couldn't be more unsimilar, right? Esau, he's a hunter. He likes the outdoors, the open country, and Jacob's more of a homeboy. And Isaac is drawn to Esau. That's the favorite there. And Rebecca is drawn to Jacob. That's the favoritism there, which of course is going to spell some trouble. And at one point, Jacob sort of always trying to have one up on his brother Esau. And at this one place, they have this exchange where Jacob somewhat tricks, but also Esau just gives up his birthright for some food, right? Giving up his birthright just for some temporary satisfaction, which, that's a real warning to all of us too. Not weighing out really the values of permanency versus temporary. Anyway, what we have is Isaac there's a famine in the land, and there's a king called Abimelech of the Philistines, and Isaac is ready to go back and leave to go to probably maybe back to Egypt. But the Lord appears to him, and in chapters 26 verse 2, the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all those lands, and I will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all the lands, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed me and did everything I required of him, keeping my commands, my decrees, and my instructions." And so Isaac is smart, and he stays in Gerar, where they are. But he makes the same mistake. He's scared of people, and so he does that same thing that Abraham did in Egypt. "Oh, my wife isn't my wife, she's my sister." And of course, that's discovered, and Abimelech he is cross with him, chews him out about that. What could have happened to us? And so Abimelech says, "No one touch him." And then we read that in verse 12 that Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold, because the Lord blessed him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. And then it goes on to talk about how they fill the wells. They basically, what happens then is God blesses him so much that the people they start to envy him, and so he has to leave. And so he has to move a couple times, but eventually he gets to a place where everybody's leaving him alone, and he's doing well. And we're told that in verse 23, from there he went up to Beersheba, and that night the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid." Okay, same statement, right? Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. And it says Isaac built an altar and called on the name of the Lord, and there he pitched his tent, and his servants dug a well. And then what's interesting, it flows on, is then he's doing so well, and Abimelech and them are thinking, "Oh, maybe we sort of blew how we handled that." And they come back and they realize it's like he's a powerful threat, you might say. And they're saying, "Let's make an agreement, let's make a treaty." And so Isaac makes a feast. They can see that he's blessed by God, and Isaac makes a feast, and they have a meal, and they have this treaty, and then they go away peacefully. And we're told that Isaac's servants, they tell him about the well, and of course you need all these things, right, to survive, and the flocks to survive. And so they're in a place, they're respected, they're wealthy, they've got water, and it's good. And we're told that Esau, when he's 40, he gets married. He marries some ladies, but but this daughter, I guess a couple ladies, but it says they're a source of grief to Isaac and Jacob. Jacob's getting old, can't see very well, and it's time to give the blessing to his son Esau. Jacob, with his mom, trick Esau out of that. And of course, Esau is furious, and he says, you know what? I'll just wait till my dad dies and the days of mourning are over, and then I'm going to kill that guy. I've had it enough. And so I believe Rebecca finds out about this, and she's terrified, and she's like, Jacob, you got to go. And so Isaac sends Jacob back to where Rebecca came from, right? Haran, back to where the family is to find himself a wife. And so, because they don't want him marrying a Canaanite, right? They don't want, that importance. Marry into your faith. Marry into your faith. The faith in this one God. And then we read in chapters 28, verse 12 and following, right, that Jacob leaves and he's sleeping, and then he has this dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were descending. Angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there above it stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. And so we get, again, this promise just being passed from generation to generation. And Jacob goes on in verse 20, it says, in the morning, Jacob goes on to make a vow. If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I may return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. Right, and this stone that I set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, God, I will give you a tenth. What's that about? Well, we know that Abraham gave a tenth to Melchizedek. We know that that in the original creation story, right, part of the image, what the idea is, what we are not owners, we are managers. We represent the owner. And the way that Jacob is recognizing, this is the way I recognize that you own it all, God. It's by me giving you a tenth. I am simply a manager. That I recognize you as a provider. And maybe Isaac told him what had happened when he was a kid with Abraham, and what that kick was like, and what test God put Abraham to. And maybe he didn't want to go there. And he wanted to set out right out in front his allegiance to God, his provider. The God that was faithful. Do you know God this way? This amazing God who is a faithful provider and a keeper of his promises. Can you echo along with Jacob that the Lord is your God, the one that you serve and honor above all else? Do you demonstrate his lordship? Do you demonstrate your trust in his ability to provide through your financial giving? Do you, through how you manage your assets, recognize God as the owner and I'm simply managing? And so this sort of brings us to the end of chapter 28. And then we'll pick up. And so we've really covered, I believe it's chapters 23 through 28 that we've covered today. And we'll pick up from there next week. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.